It's a couple of minutes after 3. So we're going to go ahead and get started and let people continue to join us as the next couple of minutes go by. So welcome again to the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce Daily Action Call. Today is our Think Ahead Thursday call. And I'm Lou Ann Flanders-Steck with Launch Greensboro, the entrepreneurship arm of the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce. So before we get started, I have a couple of what I lovingly call my commercials. So if you haven't already done so, please complete your census. The information you provide is so beneficial in so many different ways to our community, including federal funding and congressional representation. So at this point, North Carolina is still ranked 38th in the nation for completion, so we really all need to get out there and complete our forms. So please do that as soon as you can. My second commercial is Launch Greensboro, of course, which I run. We have our accelerator that has run the last 14 weeks and shifted from an in-person program to virtual. So Monday, May 11th, we're hosting our first virtual demo day, where you get to see pitches from our 8 amazing companies. And so learning what they've learned and sharing what they've done over the last couple of weeks. And so I ask you to join us. You can register at launchgreensboro.com, or you can go to the greensboro.org website and go to the launch starting and growing our own, sorry about that, page, and you'll find the link to register there as well. And we always like to ask folks to follow us on social media at Launch Greensboro, at GSO Entrepreneur, and at GSO Chamber. So let's talk about a few other house rules for today. As always, this call is being recorded and it'll be archived with all of our previous calls, which can be found on the Chamber website, greensboro.org/COVID-19. And of course, if you have any questions while Shawn is presenting today, please just note them in the chat box and we will make sure that we get to as many of them as possible throughout the program. So as we keep thinking about, and now that the governor has lifted our stay-at-home orders, returning back to work, we're going to go back and stick with this HR scenario and all of the things that we need to understand as we open our offices and retail locations back up, starting slowly next week. So Shawn Straub with Alt HR Partners is here with us again this week. And she today is going to talk about the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, and some other benefits related policies that have been put in place or changed with this pandemic. So for those who haven't met Shawn and her firm, Alt HR Partners is an HR consulting firm that helps small to medium-sized businesses with their HR needs. From fractional HR to risk mitigation, she supports businesses through times like these, as well as their day-to-day operations. She's been working in the HR field for nearly 20 years in industries including multinational healthcare, retail, and nonprofit organizations. She holds a bachelor's and master's degree in psychology and also holds the 2 highest HR certifications from the National Human Resources Certification Institute and the Society for Human Resources Management. So with that intro, Shawn, I'm going to let you take it over again. And everybody, she's got a lot of information to cover. So remember that this will be recorded and saved on the website. So if you miss something, you can always go back and find it again. So Shawn, I'm going to let you take it over.
Thank you, Luann, and thank you for having me here again today. I wanted to talk today about leaves of absences. So as we do start to reopen our businesses, we may encounter some employees who either cannot come back to work because of their own medical illness, because there is illness in their household, because they are self-isolating, or because the schools are closed or childcare is closed. And I wanted to talk a little bit about what that means for you and for your business, as well as the laws that were passed that are going to protect these employees, as well as pay these employees during this time. So before we get started with the new laws that were passed, I tried this and everything. I wanted to go back and talk about the Family Medical Leave Act. So the Family Medical Leave Act was passed all the way back in 1993, and it is for any employer who has 50 or more employees within their workplace. This is a pretty straightforward act from the part where it's almost every single employer that has at least 50 employees. Employees are eligible for up to 12 weeks of protected leave if they worked for your company for at least 12 months for at least 1,250 hours during that time. And they can take those 12 weeks of leave for the birth or placement of a child, and that includes adoption or foster care, to care for a close family member who has a serious health condition, for a serious health condition that makes the employee unable to perform the essential functions of his or her job, or for military reasons, like a qualifying exigency leave, which means that somebody who's a close family member was called to active duty. And then if that family member comes back from active duty and they're injured, they can take up to 26 weeks of leave. Now, the big part of this is that FMLA is just job protection. There's no pay associated with FMLA. FMLA is an incredibly prescribed process in that the government has forms for you to fill out. There are a lot of rules and laws that go along with it, things that are specific as you can only contact employees once every 30 days while they're out on leave. Otherwise, it's seen as harassment of the employee. So this is a very complicated law. This is a law that's been around for many years. And it's a law that has really been tested by multiple lawsuits about it. However, today, the government has expanded the FMLA. And if you can all remember back to March, which I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but as far as I'm concerned, that might as well have been 1983 as well. But back in March, the government passed the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, which was one of the first laws that they passed in response to the pandemic. And underneath the Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, they did an expansion to FMLA. The expansion to FMLA is for every employer with less than 500 employees. So you'll remember traditional FMLA is only if you have 50 or more employees, whereas this expansion is for every single employer that has less than 500 employees. Even if you just have one employee, you are covered under this emergency FMLA. This is also different in that it's a paid FMLA leave. It's not just 12 weeks of job protection, it's also pay associated with it. So for the duration of this leave of absence, this extended leave of absence, employees' jobs are protected for 12 weeks, just as with standard FMLA, and employers are expected for the employee to return back to the exact same position they had when they left. Who qualifies?
So Shawn, let me ask real quick.
Yeah.
And you may cover this later, but if someone is ill, do they automatically get 12 weeks, or is it just for the length of their illness, or is that the max? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, so this FMLA, this extension of FMLA is only for the specific reason of employees that are unable to work or telework because the child's school or daycare is closed. So it's not like the other one. So this is like another, almost another reason why someone might qualify for FMLA. But the original FMLA provisions that I talked about are still for only if you have 50 or more employees.
Okay.
Your place of business. Now, if you happen to have 50 or more employees and you do have someone who's sick, they have up to 12 weeks off of work. Same with this. They have up to 12 weeks off of work if their school is closed or daycare is closed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. So for the extended FMLA, you'll remember the original FMLA is that the person had to work for you for at least 12 months and have worked at least 1,250 hours within that time. For this new FMLA, the employee only needs to be on payroll for 30 days, and there are no hour equivalents. So if somebody's only working for you 10 hours a week, they can qualify for this provision of the FMLA. And for this, as I mentioned, this portion of the FMLA only allows up to 12 weeks off of work if your employee is unable to work or telework because they have to care for a minor child, because the schools are closed or daycare is closed due to COVID-19. So it's pretty specific as to why the person would need to not be at work. And the other part of this, though, that's very different than FMLA is that they are paid. So the first 10 days of someone being out of work, or the first 2 weeks, they are unpaid. They can be unpaid. It's really important to note that this unpaid portion is at the employee's discretion, not at your discretion. So if you already have company-sponsored PTO or sick time or vacation, or as you'll note later, we're going to talk about the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act as well, you can't make somebody use any of that time during these first 10 days. If the employee wants to use it, they may use it, but as an employer, you cannot mandate that they access any of that time to be paid. The time can be unpaid. For the remaining 10 weeks of the leave, you as the employer are required to pay your employee 2/3 of their regular salary up to $200 per day. And again, as a caveat, if you and the employee both agree, so both parties now need to agree, the remaining 1/3 of their pay can be supplemented by company-sponsored PTO, sick time, or vacation time. So this part is very complicated, and to add another layer of complication onto it, any of the time that's required by the government to be paid can be taken off as a tax credit. I'm not going to talk about that except to tell you that it can be taken off as a tax credit, and that you certainly should consult with your CPA or accounting department. I'm definitely not an accountant of all the things that I can talk about. Numbers are not one of them. But it's important to know about the time that's paid versus the time that's unpaid. Now, we were talking earlier about full-time employees versus part-time employees. It doesn't matter how many hours they would normally work. The pay is just reduced by whatever their regular salary is. So it's 2/3 of whatever the regular salary is, regardless of if, it's 1 day a week, they're paid 2/3 of that 1 day a week salary.
Okay, so Shawn, this may be an accountant question.
Yes.
How do you track? So I guess you just give them 1/3 of a day, take 1/3 of a day that they would get for sick day off their queue?
Yeah.
How do you track that?
Yeah, that's correct. So I would just do it. So basically like every 3 days they lose 1 day of however much accrued vacation time that they have. A lot of times companies do accrued vacation sick time, especially accrued sick time, as hours as opposed to as full days. So you can figure it out in that way as well. Or you can just, you can do it down to per hour and do it that way.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions on the emergency sick leave? So again, that's for every single employer that has 500 or less people that are working for them. And it's allowing for 12 weeks of protected leave for any employee who needs to be out of work to care for a minor child because they don't have either regular childcare or the child's school is closed. And then the second part of that is that you need to pay them for at least a portion of their time while they're out. Okay, it gets more complicated the further we go. So we'll move forward. So the second part, which may affect even more people, is the UPSLA leave, or the Emergency Paid Sick Leave. And this was also passed at the same time as the Emergency FMLA leave with the Family's First Coronavirus Relief Act back in March. So this one is every single employee qualifies. So if you have 500 or less employees, every employee that works for you qualifies, even if they are brand new and you just hired them yesterday, even if they only work very, very part-time for you, they qualify. And this allows people to be out of work for any of the following reasons. And they are, again, there's a pay component with this as well. So people can be out of work if they're subject to state, federal, or local quarantine or isolation orders. They were advised by their healthcare provider to self-quarantine. They are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and need to seek medical care. That "and" is an important portion there. They are caring for an individual who's subject to or advised to self-isolate or quarantine, or they are caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed due to COVID-19. Now, you will recognize that one immediately from the emergency FMLA. Now, conveniently, this leave is for 2 weeks, which is the same amount of time that people can be unpaid at the beginning of FMLA. So it would make sense that they would utilize this first, exhaust it, and then continue with FMLA from the pay perspective. However, again, the government has emphasized that it is the employee's discretion whether they wish to utilize this or not. So how much do you have to pay people while they're on this? So again, this is for 10 days or 2 weeks, and for anything that's impacting the employee directly. So they're subject to a local quarantine order, they've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, or they're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19. You have to pay them their regular pay up to $511 a day with an aggregate max of $5,110. So it's for a 2-week period of time, up to 10 days at $511 a day. If they need to be out because of something that's impacting somebody else, or that last reason, which is new, is if they're caring for an individual who's under a quarantine order, like the ones that are described in the top 2, or if they're caring for a child whose school or daycare is closed, they get 2/3 of their regular pay, at $200 a day with a max of $2,000 over a 2-week period. Now, here is an interesting sort of caveat to this. After the law was passed, they added on this last part, which is that employees that are experiencing a substantially similar condition to COVID-19 may also be out of work for 2/3 of their regular pay. And the reason that that was added is because they found that a lot of people may be experiencing symptoms of COVID-19, like number 3, but are unable to seek a medical diagnosis or have chosen not to seek a medical diagnosis because of the current state of the healthcare system. So they will, if they are experiencing the same symptoms as COVID-19, they can also be out of work for 10 days at a rate of pay of 2/3 of the regular pay instead of their full regular pay.
So Shawn, when was that added? Because you and I, when we talked earlier, there's so many things that have been added in the last couple of weeks. So
yeah, so in the month of April, the last week in April saw a lot of additions and changes to the original law. And this was one of the things that was added in that last week of April. And as we move forward, you will see, we'll talk about a lot of other things too that have changed sort of in that last week of April. And the government is really trying, so the way that the government lets you know that something has changed, sometimes they actually change the law, and you can actually go to like the Department of Labor's website and you can see the filings of the law and how it was actually changed, and it will tell you exactly what was changed. But in most instances, and the way that this one was and a couple other things, is that they do FAQ pages. So if you go on the Department of Labor's website, there is an FAQ about each of these leaves. And then they will answer people's questions that have come in. And so this is an answer to one of the questions that was asked by somebody about, well, what if somebody is sick, but they can't actually get a medical diagnosis, so we don't know if it was really COVID-19. And so they've come up with this compromise.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to go back to the current company benefits because, and this is interestingly right from the FAQ page. Actually, I copied and pasted it exactly. So one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people is that we have sick leave at our company, or we have vacation time, which is, better or the same as what the government is asking us to give to our employees. Can't we just use that? The answer is no, you can't. The government has made it really clear that paid sick leave under these laws are in addition to any other of your employees' leave entitlements. And you can't ask your employee to use any provided or accrued paid vacation, personal, medical, or sick leave for any of these leaves, except, as I had mentioned in the caveat, that if you and your employee agree for the first 2 weeks of the extended FMLA leave, if that's something that they're interested in. Additionally, if your employees would like to utilize, and you agree, for them to utilize the paid vacation, personal, medical, or sick leave that you've provided as the extra third on the 3 bottom items here, you can do that as well. But it cannot replace it, and this has to be on top of what you are already offering the employee. And I think I neglected to mention this part, which sort of goes along with that. The emergency FMLA leave is an extension of the FMLA Leave Act, meaning that your employees are only entitled to it if they have not already exhausted their FMLA leave. So if you do have 50 or more employees working for you, and you have an employee who's already used up 12 weeks of FMLA, they are not entitled to this extended FMLA. And the same goes in reverse. If they use these 12 weeks of FMLA, they're not entitled to any additional leave further down the line until they're up until the year has passed and they're able to use their FMLA again. Okay. Anyone have questions on that? Okay. So both of these leaves, whoops, I missed one part. Okay, so both of these leaves have a poster that goes with that, and it's really important that you must display this poster. So these laws are in effect through December 31st. So you want to make sure that you have this poster up in your office through December 31st. Now, that doesn't mean that these laws will not be re-upped at that point, nor does it mean that if we have a new president and a new administration, that in January they'll decide to bring these laws back if they do sundown. But for now, these go through December 31st, and it's important for you to remember to have this poster displayed until at least that time. Documentation. So this is the other part that's really important. And one of the reasons I wanted to touch base about regular FMLA at the beginning, and for those of you who are familiar with it, you know that regular FMLA has a lot of documentation that comes with it. There are lots of forms that you can download. It's an extremely formal process. For both of these leaves, there is no formal documentation for the program. Even with the extended FMLA, they don't want you to use the FMLA forms. They are asking for you just to collect information about each leave request and then document the process that you went through. You can ask for medical notes, and you can also ask for notes or notices from schools or daycare providers. Now I put a little asterisk on ask for medical notes, and this was addressed by that 2/3 portion as well, in that it may be really difficult for people to get medical notes right now. And it may be something where, someone has a telemedicine appointment and they say, I'd like to get tested, and they're told, no, you don't need to be tested. So they don't know if they have COVID-19 or not. So while you may ask for medical notes, it's very possible that there may not be medical documentation available for you to actually receive. So in a lot of these cases, we're just going to have to be taking people's word for it. Now, things like schools being closed, obviously, we all know in North Carolina, schools are closed for the remainder of the school year. So we know that that is a fact. It's pretty easy to see when school systems are closed. It's my personal belief that when they were developing these laws, that a lot of it perhaps would have been in small sections of counties or states, and that it just became sort of a widespread blanket across states where it isn't really necessary for you to get documentation that a school is closed. It's pretty clear when that happens. Daycare providers may be a different situation. With daycare providers, some of them are only accepting like first responders, children, or people who are working on the front line. So you may want something from the daycare provider stating that as well. Okay, now the federal posters. Okay, so from the very beginning, the federal government has been saying that there are exemptions for small businesses to all of these leave laws, and they have changed their mind on several occasions as to what it is that you might need to do to be exempt. And I think that it's really important that as we move forward, that we should all be keeping really close track of what it looks like to be exempt, because the government has changed its mind at least on 3 occasions as to what being exempt from these leave laws look like. So I'm going to tell you as of April 28th, what being exempt looked like and meant. So their exemptions are very limited, and it's for businesses with less than 50 people. Again, there is no formal process for this exemption. You are supposed to self-document why you feel that you are exempt from these laws. Additionally, you can only claim exemption for the school or daycare portion of the law. So that is the entire Emergency Family Medical Leave Act portion of it. But for the FMLA law, the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, you can only claim exemption for if it's a minor child for school or their place of care is closed. So if they are sick, if they're caring for someone who's sick, if they need to be self-quarantined, there is no exemption for that. You must pay them for at least 2 weeks while they are out, or for a maximum of 2 weeks while they're out. So if you are thinking that you want to claim exemption, the government has made it clear that they will only grant an exemption if granting the leave would jeopardize the viability of your business. And they were very, very clear, and I did a copy and paste on this from their website, from the Department of Labor's website, as to exactly what they consider jeopardizing the viability of your business looks like. And so on the outset, it seems pretty straightforward. So if, as a small business, if the expenses and financial obligations exceed available revenue and may cause your small businesses to cease operating, then that would be an exemption. And when you're looking at that, I urge that if you received a PPP loan, you probably could not claim this exemption because the government has given you money to continue paying for your employees. So it would be difficult to prove that you didn't have the ability to pay for your employees if you received a PPP loan. If the absence of the employee that is requesting the leave would entail a substantial risk to the financial health or operational capabilities of the small business because of their specialized skill, knowledge of the business, or responsibilities. And then along the same lines, if there aren't sufficient workers who are able, willing, and qualified to take that person's place. So depending on the size of your business, depending on who else is available, those are 2 options that may jeopardize the viability of your business. So when you are thinking about this, what is really important is that you look at each leave separately. In no case would I suggest you make a blanket statement that you as a small business are exempt from providing these benefits to every single one of your employees. I think that on every occasion, you need to make the decision whether the leave that the person is asking for would indeed put your business at risk, and document why you believe that to be the case. Okay. What kind of questions do we have about that?
So, Shawn, that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. It's a lot.
So talk some more about PPP and some of the other things that taking that money might impact from any of these laws or other issues that might arise related from an HR standpoint.
Okay. So the first and foremost thing that I would say about the PPP is that if you receive the money from the government, I think it would be almost impossible for you to say that you could be exempt from any of these laws because they gave you the money to operate. Even in the aspect, of the second part here, where, at least the third one, where there aren't sufficient workers, if you receive that money, then you would also have the ability perhaps to hire a temporary worker to help them to, come in that person's place. So I think from that perspective, it would be really difficult. Additionally, with the PPP, you want to make sure that you're using it to pay for payroll expenses. So 75% of any money that you receive needs to go towards payroll expenses. So it's really within your best interest to allow these leaves to occur, so that way you can continue to pay for payroll expenses through the money that you receive through the PPP. And then the other part of it is just, I think as people come back to work, and I think as we move through the remainder of the year, this is probably going to come up on a more frequent basis. Perhaps we'll see another spike, perhaps we'll see more people getting ill. And I think it's really important that we don't forget that these laws exist and that we make sure that we are applying them in a consistent manner across all of our employee base. So when I'm talking about, looking at each employee, looking at each leave individually and deciding whether you would be exempt from offering that particular leave, it's really important to make sure that you're doing it in a way that doesn't accidentally lead to some type of discrimination. Which leads to, as we decide that we're going to reopen our businesses and we decide, perhaps we had to let some people go or lay some people off or temporarily furlough people, and now we've decided to bring some people back on board. It's also really important that we're not making those decisions based on our thoughts of, will they perhaps need to utilize one of these leaves as we move forward. So we're not going to bring back people who we know have small kids because we know that schools are closed, or we're not going to bring back people who are medically fragile because we know it's more likely that they might need to utilize one of these leaves. So it's incredibly important that we don't let the presence of these leaves impact our thinking on who we're going to bring back to work, and that we apply everything even-handedly across our entire employee base.
So Shawn, what's the easiest way to keep up with these with regulatory changes that are coming down from the federal government?
My gosh, Luann, if I knew the answer, I feel like I'd be rich. So the number one way that the federal government is telling us what they want from us is from those FAQ pages.
Okay.
And they make it pretty clear when they are making changes to those FAQs by putting it on like the homepage of their site. So relying on someone like me who goes there once a day to see what's new is probably a good idea. Relying on an attorney who's who's making sure that they're on top of these things. But the federal government agencies that have been working with this, whether it's OSHA, whether it's Department of Labor, CDC, they really have been trying to do a good job of sending out alerts and making sure that people are aware of what's happening. And they've also been trying to do a good job of answering people's questions, not on an individual basis by any means, but through those FAQs. So that part has, is the best way to stay on top of this. And honestly, like a simple Google search for, how do I claim exemption under the FLS, not FLSA, under the new leave laws. It's going to bring up a million things. Make sure you're finding the ones that say .gov on them. Go to the actual DOL's website, because there are lots and lots of people who are trying to give information and they're not always up to date. I know that I've certainly have run across several articles that, they were printed last week and it's no fault of theirs, but they're out of date already. So you want to make sure that you're always getting your information from the source, if at all possible.
And that's what I thought you'd say. So
okay.
I think that's great. I think that's helpful. What did I forget to ask you? Anything?
Well, I'm trying to look at all of my my notes that I sort of wrote down here that I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget. I think like the real takeaways here is just, because things that I've heard a lot from employers is that, things like, well, we have sick leave, we have vacation time, why should we have to give more than what we already do? And the government has recently just come out and said, you 100% need to give more than what you already have. That what you have is fine, but that these new laws are supposed to be in addition to what is already available. So I think that is just a really important point to make sure that people understand. And that the exemption portion of this, which at the very beginning, for people who have been sort of following along this whole time, at the very beginning, they claimed that anyone who had 50 or less employees could be exempt from all of this. And that just simply is not true at all. And so just making sure that everybody is up to date on that portion of it. At this point, they've really closed in the exemptions so much. I think the only thing that, if I could use a crystal ball, would be that they would make you apply to some type of state or federal agency and be approved for the exemption. That would sort of be the only thing left that they could do, aside taking away the exemption completely. And then just working with your employee, and that is something that is absolutely all over the government's sites, is that they want you to work with your employee, if at all possible, on every aspect of this. So if your employee is coming to you for a leave and you feel like, you're not sure if you can accommodate them, they want you to work with your employee, and they want to make sure that, everyone feels like they've had a say, and everyone feels like they can really, feel good basically about moving forward. And that's definitely on there. They've given some provisions to the employers, they've given some to the employees. And when you look at it, overall, it does try to balance on both sides, but really working with your employee and being communicative about what's available and what you're able to offer, I think would be incredibly important.
Okay, well, great. So Holly just posted up what I was about to talk about. Okay. So Shawn, thank you so much again. There is just, like I said earlier, there's so much to cover, and this is, and it's ever changing. So and it's new for those of us who have under 50 employees. I mean, it's been a long time since I worked for an organization that had over 50 employees. And so to think about this as a big, huge change is really vital and really important. So thank you again for sharing your expertise with us. So just as you know, there is still more to talk about in this space, you can imagine. So Shawn has agreed to join us again next week. So what she's going to do is provide us any updates, as the government tends to do, is make some changes, make more changes. So she's going to provide us any updates to legal and regulatory issues that we need to know, but it's really an Ask the Expert, 30 to 45 minutes. So if you've got questions that you'd specifically like covered, that you'd like for her to make sure she covers, please send an email to Holly West at the Chamber. Her email is hwest, W-E-S-T, at greensboro.org. Again, Holly, you can put your email in there if you'd like to. So Holly West at greensboro.org. If you've got a question that you'd like Shawn to specifically address, please send those questions to Holly. And also, the Chamber, in partnership with Alt HR Partners, as Holly has posted, have put together a guide to reopening. It's called Returning to Work, the Restart Guide. It's on the Greensboro website. It covers the OSHA rules and regs that she covered last week, as well as this FMLA and expanded paid sick leave, and also a checklist of essential steps to cover yourself. I talk a lot about scaring the bejesus out of entrepreneurs when we do our programs. This is one of those things that if you really dig deep, you might get a little nervous about it. And that's what this guide is, to help you make sure that you get all of your I's dotted and your T's crossed. So we welcome you to utilize that tool that Shawn has so graciously provided for us. So thank you for that again, Shawn. So I'm going to provide 2 more reminders. Please complete your census and join us for Launch Lab Demo Day. And also wanted to let you know, and I didn't put it in my script, so now I can't remember who's joining us. She is the interim director with the Guilford County Health System. And if someone will remind me of her name, that would be lovely, because I didn't put in my script. So I'm looking really quick. Oh, I'm not going to find it. But Brent Christensen will be with us tomorrow again for our Friday forum. And so if you will join us again at 3 tomorrow, it is Julia Mann will be joining us tomorrow at 3 with Brent Christensen as our host. So we welcome you to join us again tomorrow at 3, and I hope you all have a lovely afternoon and evening. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.